Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, and Banneker Bones and the Alligator People, and the upcoming third, still yet to be revealed third Banneker Bones adventure. Banneker Bones is a biracial 11-year-old boy genius detective. His cousin Ellicott Sculworth comes to live with him in Latimer City from the small town of Brownsboro, Indiana, only to be attacked by giant robot bees, which the boys then have to fight with EMP blast rifles whilst riding around on jetpacks, as naturally that is the only way to approach a giant robot bee infestation. If you're curious, you can check out Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees as a paperback and audiobook narrated by the exquisite David Radke, and the ebook is free to download whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. So check that out. Once you're hooked on the series, come back and see me for books 2 and 3 with money. Under the super secret pen name Robert Kent, I write stories for older readers, such as the young adult novel All Together Now a Zombie Story, and All Right Now a Short Zombie Story. Both of those are about, zombies primarily. If you like The Walking Dead, it's very close to Walking Dead fan fiction. We've got teens that are in action beat by beat. Every chapter ends with a cliffhanger, constantly being chased by zombies and dealing with the emotional fallout of the end of the world from a teenager's perspective. And then I've got the serial horror novel, The Book of David, which is a 5-volume serial horror novel. Broken up into chapters. It's about an atheist who buys a haunted house that then begins to give him religious visions involving flying saucers. It is way out there. It's crazy. It is me doing my best Stephen King impersonation. It's very much for adults. So if you like the idea of a long horror story with lots of violence, lots of profanity, lots of everything, The Book of David is the one for you. You can check out The Book of David, Chapter 1 by Robert Kent. Not Rob Kent, Robert Kent. You can get that first chapter for free as an ebook whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. So check that out. Get that one. Get Banneker Bones. They're free. Go nuts. If you want to keep tabs on who's coming up on the podcast, I don't announce the next guest anymore because I'm always wrong. But next Saturday, you bet I'm going to be sitting here with somebody else who's going to be amazing, as I try to be for you each and every week. But you head to middlegradeninja.com. You can at least see a listing of who's scheduled to appear in the near future. You can also read interviews with hundreds of literary agents, editors, and other authors, publishing professionals, the kind of folks that you want to know more about. So check that out. And that's it for the announcements. So let's get started. Today I'm talking with Angie Karcher. Angie, how are you this day?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for clearing time out of your schedule. We were talking a little bit before, and it sounds like your schedule is just booked wall to wall with different activities you've got going on. So I really appreciate you clearing a spot.
Oh, no problem. No, it is booked. It's been quite a busy year of ups and downs and lots of exciting moments. And so, no, I'm happy to be here and talk to your viewers.
Well, give the esteemed audience kind of an overview of your background, since they haven't, like me, been stalking you online to find out all kinds of nifty questions to ask you tonight.
Sure. Well, I live in Evansville, Indiana, very southern part of Indiana, right across the Ohio River is Kentucky. And I have lived here my entire life. But I am originally a kindergarten teacher. I got married to my wonderful husband, Stan, and we have 4 children who are grown. And over the years, I was a stay-at-home mom for about 15 years, which I loved. I don't regret that at all. It was an amazing experience. And then I did a number of various jobs. I was a developmental therapist with First Steps, which is a state-funded program to help kiddos that are delayed. It was an in-home visits, and I did that for about 3 years. Then I worked as the early childhood coordinator and then director of education at our local children's museum, which is called CMO. Children's Museum of Evansville, and that was the most fun job I ever had. constantly creating activities and events for families and kids, just for the sake of having fun and learning. So, and then my first book came out, and I thought, if I'm ever going to actually do this writing thing, which I had been doing on and off for a number of years, I thought that was the time. And so I became a children's author. And at this point, I have 3 books out and 3 more to come. And so, honestly, as a teacher, I never, ever thought I would be a writer. And so you don't always know what you're going to be when you grow up.
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out. This is definitely a big part of it, but there could be more yet to come, I'm hoping.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
So when did it turn around for you that you said, oh, I do want to be a writer. I'm interested in this?
Well, when we had young children, and this is kind of sad to say, but honestly, when we got a home computer and then we got the internet, I had been writing short stories and poetry for our kids just for fun. And I got online, connected to the big wide web, and started researching if you wanted to be a writer, how to go about that. And I had no background, no idea really how to do it. And that was back in the, early or till late 80s, early 90s. And that was in the days of chat rooms, which sounds kind of creepy now. But there were chat rooms for writers, children's authors. And so I made my way to those and I wasn't brave enough to comment. I would just read them and try to learn and figure it out. And they kept mentioning this acronym SCBWI, and I had no idea what that meant, and I absolutely was not brave enough to chime in and ask anyone. But finally I figured it out. It stood for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So I found their website, and they were listing events, and so conferences in Los Angeles and Taiwan and London, and one in Terre Haute, Indiana. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. Like it's meant to be. And so I went to this conference. It was in Indiana State University, and I thought, I have no idea, what I'm doing, but I'm gonna pretend I'm a writer. You go to those first events feeling sort of like a fraud because you don't really know what you're doing, but you want to portray that you're confident. And so I wore flowy, long clothing, which seemed like what a writer would wear.
Don't worry, writers. Eventually, you absolutely know what you're doing. You just have to fake
exactly
it first.
What I wear now, which is really funny because that's totally what I wear. But I went and met amazing people, and that was the beginning of my writing career.
So what year was that you attended your first conference?
That was about in 2002. And so I was a member full-time for off and on for years. And so as life allowed, I would go to conferences, but you can imagine raising 4 young children. They were very close in age. Some years I just couldn't participate. And so fast forward many years later, 2012, it's when I was director of ed at the Children's Museum. I was asked to sit on a board for our bicentennial celebration of Evansville, Indiana in 2012. And I'm sitting there with a whole group of historians taking notes to represent the Children's Museum. And they kept mentioning how they had all these activities and events, and they had all this money, but they had nothing to offer children and families. And so I had a manuscript in my computer at the time that had been sitting there for 7 years. And I had written a history of Evansville for children, mostly because I had taught 3rd grade, which is the year that they learn local history in Indiana. It's state mandated. And then when my oldest child went to 3rd grade, they didn't have a book anymore. And so I mentioned to the committee that I had this book. Of course, then they were interested. They vetted it. And within a year, we wrote a grant, and we were awarded $13,000 to put Where the River Grins in all 3rd grade classrooms in Evansville, Indiana. And that was my first book. And I thought, okay, now I'm going to be a writer.
Done. Here it is.
Done. Exactly.
That is a lot of hustle to go out and get a grant. I mean, you did that yourself, right? I assume you had a little bit of help.
Yeah, it's always nice when they say, we have this money to spend. Can you write a grant for it? And that is honestly the way it worked. There was lots of corporate sponsors for the Bicentennial. And just so happened that the publisher ended up getting word of the manuscript. It's a small town I live in. He just happens to be in Evansville. It's Mark Thompson is my publisher of MT Publishing. And so I met with him, and the only way I would do it is if the historians on my committee would vet it for, history, facts. I'm a kindergarten teacher, but I have a love of history, and I wanted to make sure, of course, everything was accurate. And so it was a really nice collaboration between my publisher and the historians and the school corporation to make sure that the teachers could use it. And so they still use it today in the third grade classrooms.
That is a perfect built-in local market that you've identified, and I assume cornered. I don't know if there's somebody else in Evansville that you have fights with on a regular basis trying to get in on your territory.
No, not really. And, I often do talks at conferences on regional publishing. It is really a great way to get your foot in the door.
And then that led on. At what point did you go on and get your literary agent? Because I'm assuming you didn't have one at that point, right?
Oh, I did not. Well, so that publisher asked me to write another book, so I did. It was a middle grade biography called The Legendary R.A. Cowboy Jones, and it was about a jockey at Ellis Park Racetrack, which is actually in Kentucky, and he was 75 years old and still racing at the time. And that took about a year of my life to do, lots and lots of personal interviews and lots of archival photographs. And so lots of research. But what I learned is how to do all of that, because when someone asks you, do you know how to write a middle grade biography about a jockey, you say, absolutely. And then you figure it out, right? And so that's exactly what I did. And so I'm not afraid to take chances. And then the third book with the same publisher was one that I pitched to him myself, and it was called Santa's Gift. And it's a true story, but it's written in a fictional historical fiction where the characters in the story are fictional, but the actual Santa Claus statue is in our town, and it's 35 feet tall, and it was built for a Christmas bazaar, and it stood on a highway in Evansville, Indiana for about 30 to 40 years, and all of a sudden it disappeared one day. And the story talks about how he was found, and the community came back together to fix him and put him back up. And so in the process of that, at that point I had 3 regional books. I had quite a variety: nonfiction, biography, and historical fiction. And keep in mind that I attend lots of conferences and events through SCBWI and throughout all of this time period. And the way that I got my agent, which was your question, so I'm with Victoria Salvaggio with Storm Literary. She's actually my second agent. My first agent, I was with her for about 3 years, and it wasn't a great fit for me personally. That is a very important relationship, and you have to have it's almost like a family member. And this particular agent was not a real hands-on person, the first one. And my agent now is very editorial, and so she gives me lots and lots of feedback and great direction on if something's not working, how to fix it, what she suggests. And but I signed with her because I had been sort of stalking her for a while, as we writers often do with agents. I had a top 5 list, and she was number 1 on my list. And I had won a contest from a very small publisher on the East Coast for a manuscript that I sent in called The Sandcastle Man. And they wanted to publish my book. That was the prize for winning this contest. And so because I had been submitting manuscripts to Victoria, I contacted her and I said, hey, I have this sale, even though it was a contest, it's considered a sale. And would you be interested in representing me? in this process. And she said, well, I don't represent anyone on just a one-time basis, but send me 10 to 12 manuscripts. I'll take a look, and if I feel like we're a good fit, then we'll move forward. And so I did. So that means you have to have at least 10 to 12 manuscripts ready to go, because you got to send them, right? So these are picture books, and which is what I'm focusing on.
Okay, Victoria knew they were picture books when she requested 10 to 12.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So, oh my God, what an ambitious person.
Yeah, it's a very different thing, picture books versus a novel. So, yeah, so I sent her 10 to 12 things, and she texted or emailed back a couple days later and said, hey, can we talk? Which I've come to learn that typically that means if they want to talk to you on the phone, that's a really good sign, you know? And so she and I talked on the phone for about 3 hours. We really hit it off. Just personally, we connected. We got along great. She's Midwestern. Also, she lives in Cleveland, Ohio area. I'm in Southern Indiana. There was just an instant connection. And so we talked, and I signed with her that day verbally. And what's ironic is the contest that I won, and I didn't even realize this until later, because she started jumping in to sort of finagle that process for me. The contest was for unagented authors. And so that meant that I couldn't win. But what I realized is that having the right agent after having one that wasn't the best fit for me was so much more important than getting a book published with a publisher that was small and probably would not do a whole lot for my career. And so I ended up passing on the publication, so then somebody else could win that, which is an opportunity for them. And then I got the agent that I wanted.
Well, I think it sounds like you won.
I definitely won. We've met in person twice now, which is really unusual for authors to meet their agents. I've found out we've been very fortunate. We've been able to really hang out and get to know each other. And so I'm very fortunate. She's amazing. We actually sold a book together to a national publisher just in January. And so I can announce it even though it hasn't been announced officially. Because it can take, you sell a book. So I sold a book in 2019. It won't come out till spring of 2021. So it gives you a very interesting perspective on time frame. Because when I sell a book to my regional publisher, it can typically come out the next year, or sooner.
2021, that's practically breakneck speed for a traditional publisher.
I'm actually very pleased with how quickly. Yeah, it's very quick for this, for picture books. But it's called The Lady of the Library, and it's sold to Sleeping Bear Press, which is a very small but amazing publisher in Michigan. Very well-respected publisher. So I'm thrilled with that. That was my ultimate goal, was to make it to that next level, the traditional publishing level. And so we've signed contracts, and now I'm waiting to find out who the illustrator will be, because that's not, in my control. The publisher picks the illustrator. And so we haven't started any edits or anything, but I'm very excited to turn that corner. And we've got several editors with some interest on about 3 or 4 manuscripts that I have out right now. So if I could just sit down and do some writing, with a daughter getting married this year and lots of other travels and things that I had already committed to, sometimes that's the biggest challenge.
It's just finding that consistent time to write.
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
I need you to tell me that at a certain point in your career, it becomes easy and automatic, and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, and then the little horn's gonna. No, it is challenging. I've been doing this off and on for many years. 2012, for sure, what I would consider professionally, where I'm writing full-time, submitting with agents, and I'm still trying to find the balance. I have become very involved with SCBWI, which is such an important organization to many writers and illustrators. And so
you are the regional advisor for Indiana. Is that right?
Yes, yes. I just took over as regional advisor for Indiana in June. And I have an amazing team. Diane Bradley Cantor is my assistant regional advisor. She lives up in South Bend. And then Teresa Robeson is our illustrator coordinator, and she lives in Bloomington. And it's been so much fun. We're actually all three really good friends. And so we're a little older. Our kids are grown nearly. And so we have a lot of time to dedicate to it. And so we're excited about really giving back and helping to offer important yet fun activities and events for Indiana authors and illustrators.
Gotcha. So there's a lot to drill down on there, because I want to ask you more about your agent experience, and I want to definitely ask you a lot about the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. But let's start there, because you said that you first originally joined in 2010. Is when you first joined? 2002. And then, so what is the process? When did you become involved to the point? Because I'm assuming it wasn't just show up at a conference, third conference. Hey, you want to be a regional advisor?
I'm going to be in charge. No, not at all. No, I attended conferences as an attendee for many years, off and on, when I could. And then about 7 years ago, I attended my first national conference for them, which was in Los Angeles. And that sort of opened my eyes to the bigger world of writing and illustrating. Because, when you only stay in your area or regionally, it's amazing what is offered, but you sort of, you have to open yourself up, I think, to the broader experience. And so SCBWI is an international organization. It's huge. And it's been around for many, many years. I can't even tell you how many countries and states. I mean, obviously all of the United States are involved, but there's hundreds of countries where SCBWI is represented. But I went to the Los Angeles conference and met editors and agents and dozens of other authors and illustrators. And then I've attended the New York conference, which is in February, several times. And it sort of gave me a platform, which I learned was as important, if not more important sometimes, than the book. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and meet editors, meet agents, because you can have an amazing book that's sitting in your computer, but unless you're willing to get out there and really pound the pavement and try to sell it, which is what you do by going to conferences, it's going to sit in that computer for a very long time. And so when you go to conferences, if you go to a session with an editor or an agent, you get to submit a manuscript to them with a free pass. And so a lot of people don't understand that, but a lot of agencies are closed to submissions. And so they will not accept anything. And some agencies do, but that manuscript goes to a slush pile. And of course, we don't have physical slush piles anymore, but I'm old enough that when I first started submitting manuscripts, there were physical slush piles, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts stacked up, and you had to mail them, and you had to send a self-addressed stamped envelope so they could mail the rejection back to you.
Oh, yes. No, I have somewhere I took it down. I used to have a nail just filled with all my mailed back rejections and my SASEs.
Yeah, exactly. It's a real thing. And so when you go to these conferences, it gives you the opportunity to submit to people that you would never have the chance to do, especially if you're unagented. And so, even though I didn't get my agent particularly that way, the connections that I made by going to conferences and finding out about her and talking to other authors who knew her and had been represented by her is how I ended up creating a list of agents that I was interested in. And so SCBWI has been a huge part of my process and my success, and so I'm excited to be able to give back.
So more questions about that, but maybe we should, just for folks listening that want to go to conferences or maybe been to a conference or two and are thinking that it's time to go to more. One, is there a way to generate funding for that beyond just working extra jobs here and there and saving money? And two, what tips do you have for conference goers to get the most out of that conference?
Yeah, that's the tough part, figuring out how to be able to afford to go to conferences versus what you're going to get out of it. And so I worked off and on over the years. I worked a part-time job. I was fortunate. My husband, has a job such that I was able to stay home with our kids. But even then, I would still do as much, work as I could, working for friends or doing various jobs over the years. So I would try to raise what money I could that would afford me to go to the conferences, so that wasn't coming out of our family budget. A lot of people will be able to raise money to go to at least one, what they call big conference a year. And so I think, that goal of that, because you're investing in yourself, honestly, and attending one conference where you can submit to an editor or an agent could change your writing career or your illustrating career. And so it became a priority for me, especially after I started going to the bigger conferences. It really started helping me understand the broader view of publishing and really got an understanding for the business side of things. And it's not just about the writing. If you're not somebody who's willing or able to speak in front of people and do school visits and do blog interviews and book signings, if that's something that you have that really challenges you, then you need to think about that, because that is at least 50%, if not more so, of the job. It is not just the writing, and so now I've forgotten what your whole question was.
It was a really long, involved question. It was a little ridiculous. So if I'm going to a conference and I want to eventually become Angie Karcher, the regional advisor for the place, I want to take over, but I want to start small. Yes. What are tips do you have for somebody to get the best experience out of attending a conference like that?
Oh, right. The second part. Okay. So, whoops. Oh, I've lost my pillows. Hold on.
Stand by, folks. Pillow difficulties.
Stand by. Okay. So attending a conference, so you want to read the directions after you've registered, read the directions very, very carefully. You always want to submit for a manuscript or a portfolio critique if you can, because, we spend a lot of time finding amazing editors and agents and authors and art directors to come in and we bring these people in from New York and Los Angeles and wherever across the country. So, that little bit of extra money that you can spend to get a critique with them is the most valuable thing that you can do at a conference. And so you're getting automatic feedback, and if they love what you've written or what you've illustrated, then they're going to ask for more. So that could change your career. There are moments that literally people's careers are made at conferences because they requested a critique. And so even if somebody doesn't love what you've written, you're going to learn why it didn't work. You can go home, you can revise and edit, and you know what to do differently to submit it to the next one. But the other thing is, I think, just get out there and meet people. Pass out your business card to everybody. We have these always have business cards, always. And I one suggestion I had that I think is a great suggestion is to always have your face on the business card, because as an editor or an agent, especially, you go to these conferences and they do dozens of them every year, if not more. They meet so many people. But, like, I'm a facial person, so I can recognize somebody from their face. Maybe I won't remember their name. But always hand out a business card with your face on it. You want to have your email. You want to have your website ready to go. You always want to have, they're always going to say, well, what are you working on? So that means you need to have a pitch ready. So that's like an elevator pitch, is where you sort of spend, about 30 seconds pitching your idea of a manuscript to an editor or to an agent. So you need to have a few of those in your pocket and ready to go. And just as general conversation comes around, you can come right up with what it is that you're working on. And the cool thing is, they might say, oh, I really love that idea. We don't have anything like that on our list of what we're ready to publish. And so would you send that to me? And then you get to do that. And so meeting other authors and illustrators, meeting people, networking, that is the one thing that I learned the most from going to especially the bigger conferences, is the networking value alone. I used to run, I still do, but I had to take a break for a little while, but it's called Rhyme Revolution. And so it was a writer's challenge that happened every April, and it was for authors that write rhyming picture books. And so I would invite authors and editors and agents that would write a blog post on my blog, and then people would read the blog and they would comment, and everybody who commented on that particular blog was their name was put in a hat for a prize for that day. And so by the end of the month, we had given away lots of books that had been donated and critiques and just opportunities to submit to various people. And so that, it used to be called Rhyming Picture Book Month. And now it's called Rhyme Revolution. It sort of took on a life of its own. And so now we have the Best in Rhyme Award, which I give out in New York City every year in February. But all of the bloggers that I use were people that I met at conferences.
That's perfect. So with so many questions, I'm wondering where to even begin. One more question about the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and I definitely want to ask you about running your own conference and everything that's involved with that. But say that you're somebody that's in, a place like Indiana or any of the other Midwest states where you're not at the biggest conferences out in Los Angeles, New York. If there's not a huge conference going on, there's just kind of smaller conferences going on. What other benefits are you getting for your membership to the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, even if you're not able to attend all of those?
Yeah, of course. Well, just first of all, just being a member is of value. So when you are sending a manuscript to, let's say, an agent, and they want to know sort of your credits, if you put down that you're an SCBWI member, that gets their attention. That to them, that is in my opinion, the professional organization for children's authors and illustrators. So if you put that down, they understand that you are a professional, that you understand the importance of learning how to write and submit and promote your books in a professional way. So that alone, I think, brings a lot of weight. But also we offer critique groups. We have Manju Howard is our critique group coordinator. So all you have to do is contact her, and she will set you up in either an in-person critique group, if there are lots of them that meet around the state, or an email or a Facebook critique group, or really whatever you're looking for. That is the key, because you don't ever want to submit anything to an editor or an agent that hasn't been thoroughly reviewed and critiqued by other people. Not your family, not your family.
But my mom really loves it.
They love everything. I know they love everything we write. But if you can get into a really good critique group, or even find a really good critique partner, somebody who is going to give you feedback, honest feedback. You also have to develop a very thick skin, because if something's not working for me, I want to know. And so if somebody tells me, oh, this section is very unclear, I want to go back and fix that. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I want it to be perfect. I want it to be as understandable and entertaining and enjoyable to kids as possible. And so that's what a critique group can be for you. But also just being a member of SCBWI, we offer conferences. We have a retreat coming up this fall. The Autumn Frost Retreat is at Brown County State Park, and that is November 8th through the 11th. That's our very first big event as a new SCBWI regional team that we're putting on. We're also offering a yearly cheer celebration luncheon, which is going to be December 14th in Indianapolis. We're actually bringing in Stephen Mooser, who is one of the original founders of SCBWI with Lynn Oliver. But Stephen's coming in, and he's going to do a morning chat with whoever wants to come. It's a free event. There will be an expense for the luncheon, and then we're going to announce lots of exciting good news, things coming up. We have a new mentor program that we're offering starting in 2020. And so we're going to be announcing who the mentors are and how people can apply to that. And that will be hopefully going on every year from now on. So that will be one-on-one, collaborations with a mentor and a mentee where they work on different genres of writing and illustrating. We because we're all a little older ladies and we've been around a while, we're trying to bring back some things that we know have worked in the past, and then we're also trying to offer some new events for people. We have the Hoosier Book Happenings, which we've brought back. Our library mentor or coordinator, Karen Kalinsky, is doing that. And so she'll put that out a couple times a year, and that is a newsletter with Hoosier books written and illustrated by Hoosier authors. And that is a newsletter that goes to all the libraries in Indiana, public, private, and school librarians. And we're really trying to make connections with, like my goal would be to make connections with universities, with all schools, with libraries, with bookstores, and just really help people understand in those businesses what SCBWI is and what we can offer, because we have all of these authors and illustrators that do school visits, which can help kiddos understand, what it is that we do, and, maybe that gives them some direction in their future, what they want to be as they grow up.
That's a lot of benefit that you can get out of a single membership.
And
I should point out, while we're talking about Hoosier authors, I always encourage authors, if you're interested in being on the #1 children's book podcast, I assume, I don't know, who vets these things?
Absolutely.
Hoosier authors always get preference. I'm very Indiana-centric. I'd be happy to chat with you. So everybody that's listening that's in Indiana, know that you've already got a foot in the door beyond any authors outside of the state. So we've talked about the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I wanted to also ask you about the Rhyming Revolution, your conference that you're running. Starting with, when did you decide that you needed to run your own conference, and why did you want to do it separate from the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators?
Well, back after my first book came out, when I didn't know at all what I was doing as a writer, but I had this book, right?
All evidence to the contrary. Because it's going pretty well. You got a book. You're out there selling.
Yeah, it's so far. I am that person that says, yes, I know how to do it, and then I figure it out, right? So I wrote the book, and then I had to figure out how to go about publishing and marketing and all of that. But I'm also not afraid to say no, and I usually figure out, what it is that needs to be done. But I had taken an all-day webinar. And it was on platform, and it was because people kept talking about platform, and I didn't really understand what that meant. And this has been a good amount of years ago. And so basically at that point, that's when social media was, to me, it was very new. Like I had probably 6 Facebook friends, and they were my relatives, and it was talking about how you have to sort of create this social media presence, and you need to figure it out what it is that's your thing, and that then can become a way that you can become known. And so your book is out there, but you know what? There are lots of books out there. And there are lots of books in your genre out there, and lots of books in your genre by people all over the world. And so why would people buy your book? You have to figure out what it is that you can do to make your name and your title of your book and the topic of your book important. And so what I always love to do, even though my first book was completely nonfiction, The History of Evansville, my second book, also completely nonfiction, The History of the Biography of a Jockey. My third book was What Is My Passion and My Happy Place. It was written in rhyme. And it's a rhyming picture book about the Santa statues. It's called Santa's Gift. And so that, being a kindergarten teacher, I understand the importance of rhyme for kids with their language development and phonemic awareness. And it's just a mnemonic device. And so it helps them understand and remember, and they're learning language when they're hearing and listening to rhyme, because they're not reading it, right? Like kids are, 5-year-olds, many 5-year-olds are not reading yet. And so they are listening to it, but they can make the connections with rhyming words. And so as a kindergarten teacher and developmental therapist, I understand the importance of it for their brain and their just understanding language. But as a writer, to me, it's fun to write. To me, it's like writing a challenge, or like doing a jigsaw puzzle or a Sudoku, or the challenge of making all of the components work together to tell a story is what I like to do. And so that's where RIPIBOMO, Rhyming Picture Book Month, that's where that came from. Because I thought, I had an agent ask me many years ago, she said, I know you like to write rhymes. She said, but have you ever studied poetry? And I hadn't. I had never studied poetry. My background is in early childhood education. And I had no background in English or language. And so I thought, she's right. Like, if I'm going to have this as my platform, I really need to have a really solid understanding of it. And so as I started studying poetry and poetic techniques and everything that was involved in that, I thought, this could be my platform. And so April is National Poetry Month, but there was no event for writers in April. There are many writers' challenges out there for writers, like NaNoWriMo's coming up here in November. It's National Novel Writing Month. Back also in November, Tara Lazar had Picture Book Idea Month. It was PIBOIDMO. And so there are lots of other ones now, but at that time there was nothing in April. And that was National Poetry Month. So that became Rhyming Picture Book Month. Now, we sort of threw in poetry, too, in the beginning. But as the more and more followers I got, which I think we're near 1,000 followers right now on Facebook, in our private Facebook group, I sort of had to narrow that down, because either I could do poetry or I could do rhyming picture books. It was hard to be able to do both. And so I would have bloggers talk about how to write in rhyme. And honestly, it's not even about the rhyme. As a professional writer, it's about the meter. And if you don't know what meter is, you need to study it if you want to write rhyming picture books. But meter is the stressed syllables of a sentence or a stanza. And so that needs to be a consistent pattern throughout the entire manuscript. And so if it's stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, that's a pattern. And that is called meter. And so that needs to be consistent throughout. And even though the ending rhyming words rhyme, if they don't make sense and your story is following the rhyming word instead of what makes sense as a story, then that's wrong. And so basically what I started to do is explain to people how to do rhyming picture books professionally, because editors and agents constantly at conferences would say, well, we don't accept rhyme. And that's because they get so much terrible, horrible, no good, very bad rhyme all the time. Because people who think, as a new writer, they think, oh, well, everything has to rhyme because that's for children. Well, they don't understand meter, and they don't understand the concept of what needs to be in an actual picture book. And there is a very definitive map of what needs to be in it. It needs to have a great hook, and it needs to have tension and 3 points of tension and increasing tension to a peak moment. And then the child in the story needs to solve the problem, and then you have a satisfying ending, and that's called an arc. And so if you don't understand those things, that's sort of why I created Rhyming Picture Book Month, which later became Rhyme Revolution. And so it was about, if you're going to write in rhyme, this is how you need to do it. And if you're not going to do it this way, please don't do it, because you're making it harder for the rest of us to get published writing rhyme. And so
stop clogging up the works with your terrible rhymes.
Exactly. And also, what I started to explain to people is, when you go to a conference and an editor says, we don't accept rhyme, that's not true. They do. But they know that people that write professionally understand that, and they submit it anyway. They don't want people that don't know the business or the professional aspects of it. They don't want them to submit. And so that's a very important little clue, is that, please go to Rhyme Revolution. We have all kinds of archival. We've been doing this for, I guess, about 7 years now. And so there's lots and lots of archived blog posts where people can just go back and read, what it is and how to do it. But there are some of us that sort of get it, and I can't necessarily explain why I love writing in rhyme. To me, it's fun. It's also fun to read rhyme to kids. It's fun for kids to listen to rhyme. But there's just a joy that I find when trying to make everything work. And honestly, I think it's harder than writing a novel. And a lot of people laugh at that because they don't necessarily understand the parameters that we have to go through to write in rhyme. You have to have an amazing story no matter what. Yes, the rhyming words are important, but a first grader can write rhyme. So it's not about the quality necessarily of the rhyming words, but it's about the story, the meter, and the rhyme, and that all has to work, and it has to be interesting and funny, and the hook, and the ending has to make them want to read it again, and there's just a whole lot involved, and so people that have never done it before don't necessarily understand the challenges involved, and so that's why I created the platform.
So how long does it take an expert like you, head of the rhyming revolution, how long does it take you to write a rhyming picture book and be satisfied with it?
It's interesting. Sometimes it comes. Sometimes as a writer, you're just in that zone, and it comes, and very few words change from the very beginning when you get it down till the very end. And Santa's Gift is a perfect example of that. I tried for about 4 weeks to write Santa's Gift, and I had this rhythm in my head, and that seemed to be what was speaking to me, and I tried to write it in that rhythm, and it was not working at all. And so I would put it away, and then I'd work on it again, and it wasn't working, and I'd put it away, and I'd step back for a couple weeks, and then the day I wrote it, I actually went and sat on the Ohio River with my computer, and it literally came out almost all in one full sweep. Very little has changed since then. And what's so crazy is it's in the exact meter that I was trying to write it in. And by the time I finally wrote it that way, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. It was just internal. I do have a musical background. I played in band in grade school and in high school. And so I think that definitely aids in my meter ability, because it's like if somebody's a good dancer, they have a great rhythm. Well, you have to have a great rhythm to be a writer of rhyme as well. And it can be taught. It certainly can. But it's a whole lot harder to teach somebody who doesn't have good rhythm how to write in rhyme than if they do have a good rhythm internally. And so to answer your question, Santa's Gift, honestly, I probably wrote that in about 45 minutes. And very little has changed since then. And other picture books, I would say, work on bits and pieces. That can take a couple of days to a couple of weeks. But for me, most of the time, either it comes or it doesn't. And if it's not coming, I just put it away. Because the struggle and the frustration of really just trying to force it doesn't work for me. I wish I could say that I was somebody that sat down at my computer every morning at 8 a.m. and I wrote. But I'm not. I'm somebody that if I get and I have a running list of ideas in my phone of titles or concepts that I just will, it'll come across me typically when I'm driving. A lot of times if I'm scrolling through Facebook in the evening, just relaxing, I have in Facebook you can save images. And so I have hundreds of images that says cool idea. And those are meaning cool picture book ideas. And so I wish I could tell you that I had time to go back through all of those, but I haven't yet. But those things sometimes, writing a book isn't necessarily just sitting at a computer writing. A lot of times writing a book is just sitting and thinking. And so I do a lot of thinking when I'm driving. I do a lot of thinking when I'm in the shower, or when I'm laying in bed ready to fall asleep at night. And so those ideas are percolating. And once I figure out the beginning and the middle and the peak moment of tension, and then the solution, and I come up with characters. I'm a very visual writer, and I'm also a closet illustrator.
Oh, yeah?
I don't like to tell people that often because it feels like a lot of pressure. I have no training in illustration whatsoever, but I've always been very artistic, and I love to do crafts. And I did present a portfolio at the Los Angeles SCBWI conference this year. And it was horrifying to put yourself out there like that.
Wasn't it horrifying in a way that's different from having put your books out there?
Oh, it's so much worse. Yeah, it was so much worse. But it's like I told somebody, it's like writing a first draft of something and putting it out on a table for hundreds of people to flip through. That's what it felt like to me. Because I have no illustrator critique group. It was just me putting some illustrations that I thought told stories out there. And so will I do it again? Maybe. But I do think that I write very visually. And so I think that definitely helps me, to sort of imagine what those characters look like. But there is nothing more exciting than to have a picture book come to life when you start to see the illustrations from that illustrator. Especially if you really connect with that person. It's like, oh, it's exactly what I was thinking, And so that to me has been the most rewarding thing, is to see the illustrations from a story that I've written come to life in a book.
Now, of course, I'm talking to you in the phase of waiting for your newest illustrator to illustrate the new book, which remind people, what's the title of that book that's coming out in the near future?
Yeah, it's called The Lady of the Library, and it's published by Sleeping Bear Press, and it comes out in May of 2021. And so I envision the Lady of the Library. I envision her as being sort of an Amelia Bedelia type character. She has haunted this library for who knows how many years, and she comes down one morning walking through walls and rattling chains and doing her normal morning shenanigans, and she walks downstairs and no one's there. And then she realizes the library's closed. There's a lock and chain on the door, and there's a sign that says to be demolished soon. And she realizes then her home is going to be torn down. And so she's just completely distraught. And the next morning, people come in and they're boxing up books and they're tearing down shelves, and in walks a little girl, very precociously says to the lady of the library, who's sitting precariously on a chandelier crying, that, get down here. We've got work to do. We need to save this library. And the two of them collaborate on the best way to create interesting and fun shenanigans that draw people in to come visit the library, and they make donations. And I won't tell you the end of the story, but you can pretty much be assured that it's a happy ending.
Angie, you are such a hustler. Is there any librarian in the world that doesn't want to read that book aloud to their kids to come in? That's brilliant.
I hope not, right? No, I will say I think the end of the book says something like, and hopefully she'll be haunting a library near you soon.
Or at least Angie Karcher can. Please visit her website and invite her to come see your library.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that also has a local connection, because in Evansville, Indiana, we have a Willard Library, which is supposedly haunted. And it's actually, if you type in haunted libraries, it popped up first for me on Google.
You guys have a 24/7 webcam where people can watch in the library? Yes, I've done that.
Yes, and it's their ghost is called the Gray Lady, which is actually copywritten. And so I couldn't write a book specifically about her, so I made it loosely about her and haunting this library. Although in that story, Willard Carpenter, who built the library, ended up in his passing, in his will, he donated all the rest of his millions of dollars to support the library instead of to his daughter. And supposedly the Gray Lady is his daughter, and she comes back and haunts the library. But so it's exciting to me to still have a local connection, even though this story can be, promoted nationally, to libraries. And I do remember consciously thinking when I wrote the book that libraries are struggling these days, and how important it is to support all libraries, a lot of public schools or schools in general don't even have a school librarian anymore. And as a teacher, that just breaks my heart. And so I want to be able to do what I can, especially as a writer, to make sure that libraries will live forever and always have hard copy books for, children and adults.
So at this point, now that I'm talking with you and you haven't seen the illustrations for the book and you know what a big deal it is and you're not doing them, is that filling you with a special kind of anxiety that's different from the usual anxiety that writers feel on a regular basis?
Are you implying that we all have lots of anxiety? Because
yes, I know we do.
Absolutely, we do. There's a definite excitement that comes with it, Yes, I would love to see who the illustrator is. I will say that even though I have these regional books published, I would be considered a new author in the traditional market. And so oftentimes they will put a new author with a big illustrator to sort of find that balance and help promote the book. So every now and then, I'm constantly looking, and thinking, oh, I wonder, wouldn't that be cool if he or she would illustrate my book? And every now and then I'll get like Facebook friend requests or somebody will follow me on Instagram and they're illustrators. And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if that's my new illustrator. So I look at it more as an excitement because I do trust my agent and I trust Sleeping Bear Press because they put out such quality books. They're highly respected they're a small press, but they put out such nice books that I'm not worried about it. It's exciting to think about who it might be, but also exciting to have a book on the national market. So
what goes into making that leap from regional publications to the national book market now that you're considered a debut author, 4 books in? And
yes.
You've got a couple of others coming out as well, don't you, still from MT?
I do. I have one that was actually going to come out here before the end of the year, and with a number of obstacles, some mine and some just the business. That book has gotten pushed back a little bit. It's the first one coming out is called A Clean Sweep, and it is about an LST ship that was built during World War II in Evansville, Indiana. And we had a shipyard here in the middle of the Midwest, which is a very unsuspecting place for a shipyard. And so it talks about kids that worked at the shipyard and how they, even though they were children, they were custodians and they pushed brooms and cleaned up and helped the war effort just as much as anybody else as an adult could do to support our country during those times. And so I'm excited about this book. I really feel like this will be well received even on a national level, because of the history involved. But that book comes out that we have an LST, an actual ship that is a museum here in Evansville, and it's actually moving to a new location on our riverfront in the spring. And so the timing of the book now is going to be considered a little bit moved towards that date, which we think will be a better marketing timing for the book. So I'm excited about that. I love history. I had no idea how much I loved history until I started writing. And then the other book that's coming out this spring, or next spring, is called SIDELINE SLUGGER, and it's about a bat boy that works at a baseball stadium, which is called Bossy Field, and again, it's here in Evansville, and it is the 3rd oldest baseball field still in use in the United States, next to Fenway Field and Wrigley Field. And who knew that happened to be in the town where I lived? And so it's used by our high school teams, and also we have a team called the Otters. And my husband would be proud of me if I could tell you what league the Otters were in, but it's a minor league team. I can't remember the actual name of the league, but it was also used in the movie A League of Their Own. And so we had Tom Hanks and Madonna and Rosie O'Donnell, and all of the stars in that movie were here in Evansville And that was the focus of most of that movie.
Did you get to meet him or just see him across the street?
I didn't get to see them. I wish I had gone and signed up to be an extra during the movie. That would have been really fun. But I've been to that stadium many, many times to watch ball games, and it is a beautiful stadium. And we're very fortunate that we have a very active historic restoration program here in Evansville, and so we've been able to maintain and restore a lot of historic buildings, especially the baseball stadium and Willard Library, with the lady of the library, and so history is important to us here.
I grew up in Lebanon, and there was a couple of seconds in the movie Hoosiers where our theater, the Avon Theater that's since burned down, the marquee was there and it had some message about the basketball team. And so when we would watch it in class, we'd wait, and then when we saw our Lebanon theater, we'd all go, yay! And then the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and actually at Bosse Field, there's still a lot of signage and everything that is still there from when they filmed the movie.
How long have you lived in Evansville?
I grew up here, so I'm 52. I'm not afraid to share that. So I've lived here my whole life, and it is such a great place. We're the third largest city in Indiana, but we're 2 hours from Louisville, Nashville, St. Louis, and Indianapolis, and so I can go see a off-Broadway show in just a couple hours or visit, family and friends, and but we get to come back to Evansville, and it's a little quieter and great place to raise a family.
You ever seen yourself living someplace else?
I really have an affinity for the beach.
Fair enough.
I did a session one time with an editor named Kendra Levin, and she had us visualizing where we would be in 10 years. And I was living in a beach house, and it was red. So yeah, I do. My husband works for the state of Indiana. He's a civil engineer, so we're here for a while. But our kids are grown, and they've all sort of, moved on in their own lives and their own homes. And so, I don't know. I wouldn't say that I would always stay here. We'll see.
Well, it seems you're extremely pro Evansville.
I am.
Just because of all the books you've written about the history. You've got your built-in base there in the third largest city in Indiana. Is there more history yet to be plumbed, you think, from Evansville that you've got planned for future books?
I do, absolutely. Evansville, of course, we're the crossroads of America and Indiana, but there is a lot of interesting history here. There's a creek here called Pigeon Creek, and it is named after homing pigeons that used to reside near the creek, and they would send messages out to people during the war, especially, very important messages that would help with the war effort, I think. So that's an interest for me to work on, a book that possibly has to do with the pigeons. But yeah, I can't divulge all my secrets.
Oh, of course not.
But that is one that I'm definitely interested in. But I have more than enough ideas and very little time these days to get them done. So I'm actually, after the writing retreat in Brown County, I'm spending a week camping alone to just get away and write. And that's often how I have to do it. I have to get away from normal life for a week or two, and sometimes as much as a month.
Is that you in a tent or a cabin? How do you do it?
Yeah, we have a camper. As we've become empty nesters, we have upgraded from a pop-up to a full self-contained camper, and so my husband's going to pull it up and hook it up all set in Brown County, and I'm going to sit with Lucy, my assistant, and do some writing, and then the kids and him are going to come spend the weekend and hang out. But a lot of times I'm always looking for someone's home. I do a lot of dog sitting or house sitting, which is also a really great way for me to get away and spend some time writing. For whatever reason, I seem to do more writing and have more less distracted time when I'm not at home.
So if you can get out there someplace nice and quiet, like with the Ohio River, possibly, playing a significant role.
Yes, and water seems to be a big part of it. We have friends that used to have a lake house down in Lake Cumberland. And I used to go down there for weeks at a time. And it was on a gorgeous lake. And there's just something about this inspiring, location. It's very quiet. I don't have the distractions of daily life. And I wish I could say that I could, be as fluent of a writer at home, but I'm just not. And so I've had to figure that out.
Well, it sounds like you've got it down. I mean, you're on book number, how many books? Six books will be once you're there?
6 that have sold. Yeah, 6 that have sold.
That is extremely exciting. And I'm assuming you've got big plans to write at least another 12, right?
Or 15 or 25, yes.
What is it that keeps you writing specifically rhyming picture books? I mean, because I'm assuming you are the guru of rhyming picture books. That's your platform. What is it that keeps you there? I'm assuming it's something that has to go back from your first step days to your kindergarten days. It's a consistent through line of wanting to communicate with children. What is it that still keeps you passionate about that subject now?
I just remember reading rhyming picture books to my own kids and how much fun that was, and also to my kindergarten classes. My favorite rhyming picture book is called Bear Snores On, and it was written by an author named Karma Wilson, which ironically was her very first picture book, and it was pulled out of a slush pile and at a big publisher, and so she became an overnight success. And interestingly enough, she was one of the authors who presented at my Rhyme Revolution conference in New York. And so we've become good friends since then. So there's nothing better than having somebody who you admire and look up to so much to then meet them and to make a connection and see that they're a real person. And she's just been very supportive of me and my career. But rhyming to me is fun to write. I love the challenge. I also love to read it. Kids love to read it. It's just good for all of us. It's good for them. But interestingly enough, my book coming out, the clean sweep, is actually not a rhyme. And so I really can't say that I always intentionally write in rhyme. Sometimes it comes out that way and sometimes it doesn't. And you just go with it. If it's coming out in rhyme, I typically go with it because that means it's usually just going to flow very easily and very quickly. If it doesn't come out that way, I'm okay with that. I don't necessarily want to always be pigeonholed as the rhymer. I wear the badge proudly, don't get me wrong. But I also have a lot of aspirations to write nonfiction. I think as a teacher, it's something, that we understand kids need to have a really good understanding of history. I would love to write, some books on, I love, oh my goodness, now I've forgotten. Now I'm blanking. Thank goodness for editing.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I've just completely forgotten his name. He's an illustrator.
It drives me nuts.
Oh. Anyway, I would love to write, more books for kids on artists and authors, and there's so many interesting stories out there, that kids, kids just don't understand in this day and age. Like librarians used to ride on horseback to take books to kids that couldn't get to a library. And so that's a story that I would love to tell at some point. Bookmobiles, they used to drive around and they still do even today, in some towns where it's a van or a bus and kids can go to the library that travels, Norman Rockwell is an artist that I absolutely love his work, and I would love to write a biography about him. So as much as I do love rhyme, I do probably love history almost more. And so if I can write a rhyming picture book that's historical fiction, that's like the golden egg for me.
And it's just, I can see on your face, it just genuinely makes you happy inside.
It does. It does. And what's so funny is I had no idea as a young person how much I loved history. I started working on the Evansville history book, the Where the River Grins, and I just became very passionate about it. And I've even taught classes through a local university on Evansville history. And I had people come in that were dressed in period costumes, and they would portray different characters throughout that time period of the founding of Evansville to, the different important things that occurred along the way. And the kids' faces, they just light up, and it becomes real. And, they have a true sense of appreciating how we got to where we are, even a small town in Evansville. It's the people that came before us that we build upon, to create our communities. So.
And how, what's the best way to impress upon kids the immediacy of history? Because I know when I was a kid, everything that happened before I was born seemed like a million years away. And now that I see how fast time has moved, and I'm 40. To turn 40 this year.
Oh, you're so young.
And I've got a 5-year-old, and I'm looking at how little time it was to get him from a baby to 5, and I'm thinking, oh my God, 5 more of those, and he's going to be someplace else. And so it occurs to me now that, okay, well, some of this history I'm reading about, that's just 2 grandmothers back to back.
It's not that far. No, it's all about perspective and how you look at it and how real you can make it. For me, it's bringing history to life as much as possible. When our kids were little, we did a lot of traveling in historic places. And it could be as simple as, Lincoln Boyhood Memorial, Lincoln State Park. There are a lot of state parks in Indiana that have historic, recreations, reenactments. We took our kids to Vincennes for the Rendezvous one time, and they had, reenactments of battles. And even though the kids, they were all different ages, being, having 4 kids, they still, just seeing it happen in front of them. We went to Boston. We went to Plymouth Plantation when they were young, and they were very young, but they still learned an appreciation from that. That was one of the coolest things I've ever done, and I really want to go back as an adult, and I would love to have taken them as they were older. But they literally take a day out of a journal from a pilgrim's life, and each person that is hired to portray a certain character during that time frame does what that person did, back in the original days. And so if they were sewing a wedding dress for those few days, that's what these ladies did. And if somebody was planting corn that day, that's what this gentleman did. And they spoke in an English accent, and they talked to each other in an English accent, and it really felt you were there with them, living that real history. And so we've been fortunate, we've been able to travel quite a bit. My brother lives on the East Coast, and so we've been able to take our children to a lot of places that we would have maybe otherwise not gone. But we've always tried to incorporate history somehow in our family vacations.
Make sure you've got a perspective. That's one nice thing about when I get to feeling down about the world. I read the news and I think, oh my God, it's all so terrible. I'll then go and I'll read some history, and I'm like, nope, this is the best it's ever been. This is as good as it gets. I hope it gets better. I'm a little bit jealous of future generations and hopefully how nice they're going to have it, but be very grateful that you're living in this day and age.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And unfortunately, a lot of things, what goes around comes around. And, if you look back and see how things were, either similar things have happened in the past that are happening now, only for other, generations. I think for me, when life gets too hectic, I'll just put on the Andy Griffith Show, because to me, that's just like simple, happy life. And, I don't want to be somebody who sticks my head in the sand. But also at times we get flooded with too much negative in the world. And so if I can write positive rhyming picture books for kids, that the kiddo's sitting in the parent's lap and they're reading that book together before the kiddo goes to bed, and it has a happy ending and they're excited to learn something, then that, to me, as a writer and a teacher and a parent, I can't think of a better job than to be able to give that to a kiddo.
We've talked about your passion for writing. But I'm curious because I assume that the starting salary for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Regional Advisor is $2 million, just flat at the end. That's their opening offer. But if that's not the case, what is it about working with them, about having your own conference, about all of these additional things that you're doing that are writer-centric but not actually writing? What fuels your passion and keeps you doing those?
Well, I wish I could say that I was getting $2 million salary for the job as regional advisor, but to many who don't know,
it's that. Probably
yeah,
not.
No, it's a volunteer job. It is a completely volunteer job. The perks that come with it, other than obviously meeting amazing people and authors and illustrators and editors and agents and people in the business regionally and nationally, that alone is invaluable, making those connections. But just, I'm an organizer, I'm a planner, I love to be involved. And I also wanted to give back to this organization that I feel like has really done a lot for me. But I have a great team and we have a lot of fun. And the perks that come with the job as regional advisor, assistant regional advisor, and illustrator coordinator is that we get to go to the big conferences at no charge. And so we're going to the Los Angeles conference every summer, which ends up being about 7 to 10 days, depending on what it is that we have signed up for. And so all of those expenses are covered. And to me, that's quite a perk, because I never thought I would ever go to Los Angeles for anything. And so to get to do that is pretty cool. I usually try to take a vacation off of that trip. So I've been to Malibu and I've been up to San Francisco. Last summer I went down to San Diego. So I'm getting to do a lot of traveling, which is also time that I spend writing. So it's a win-win for me. I've been to New York and I go to the New York conference every year and that's paid for now. So that is a definite perk for me. But the connections that I make and the meetings that I take during that time, when I'm in New York or Los Angeles, are also win-wins. Now, my Best in Rhyme Award, which I give out every February, I always time that with the New York SCBWI conference. And so the conference ends on Sunday. And then Julie Gribble, who runs Kidlit TV out of Tribeca in New York City, I go to her studio and we announce the award, which the winner, which is a live streaming announcement. And so then Julie and I have become very good friends over the years. So I usually stay with her and her husband for a couple of days, and we do some shopping and manicures and pedicures and lots of good food. And so I've become very good friends with a lot of people that have been so generous, to me and supported me in my platform. And so I've been able now to sort of combine the two worlds of SCBWI and Rhyme Revolution, and just being able to get outside of Evansville, and get to travel to New York and Chicago. I have an opportunity to possibly present at a conference in Alaska in a couple of years. And so because of the job that I'm doing now and the connections that I've made, these are things that I would have never gotten to do in my lifetime. And so I feel very blessed.
You're getting out there and you're meeting like-minded people and building yourself a nice community.
Exactly. No, for sure. For sure. I hit that 5,000 mark on Facebook, months and months ago. And so I tend to try to go back and find, it's hard to find people that I don't actually know or people that I don't communicate with on a daily or weekly basis, to try to allow more openings, into that, because I'm always meeting new people. But I am a very loyal Facebook person, and I've used that. But I would say out of the 5,000 Facebook friends that I have, most of them, of course, are for writing and for this business. But I probably met a good 1/3 of those, if not more, in person. And those are real friendships. And so I know in just about every state, if there's an event that I want to go to, there's somebody probably that I can call and say, hey, can I sleep on your couch this weekend? I'm coming to do this event, and usually get welcomed with open arms. So
So here's a fun question that I can ask, because we've established that you are an expert at attending conferences, at joining organizations, at rising up amongst them to your $2 million salary. You've got it. You've got it down. So having been to so many conferences and knowing that there's no chance we could be outing anybody specific because you've been to too many, anybody that's met you will maybe wonder if it's them. But what are the dumbest things that you see writers doing at conferences that writers should not do? Let's do a little public service announcement for all the writers listening about what not to do at a conference.
What not to do at a conference. Okay. Don't go sit in a corner by yourself. You know, between sessions, you need to get out and go to lunch and, you know, introduce yourself to the people sitting around you in a session and try to find a group of people to go to lunch with. And that's how you meet people. You can't, I think the worst thing people can do is go, you know, spend the money and travel and all the expense and effort that it takes to get to a conference, wherever it is, and then spend all of that time alone. You know, you're there to learn, obviously, but you also need to make connections. You know, there are so many people that I've met at conferences that I continue to see again at conference after conference after conference, or like I just presented at a conference in Ohio just a few months ago, and I saw 4 or 5 friends that I hadn't seen in about 4 or 5 years that we had been at conferences together before. And it's just so exciting to catch up and meet them. Yes, we all stay connected on Facebook, and I know exactly what they're doing. And, you know, we're all sort of coming up through the ranks of being successful together. And those of us, you know, those of us that haven't quite made it to that point, we're such big cheerleaders of each other, you know, and we really, it's a very supportive community. Writers buy other writers' books. And, you know, because I have a blog, I'm going to promote books of my friends and support them and buy those books and do, you know, the reviews for them. And so you have to put yourself out there and not be afraid to meet other people. I think that is probably the biggest thing that I see people sort of sitting by themselves and waiting till the next session to start. And I think you cannot be afraid to put yourself out there and meet people.
It is a cruel irony, though, that few folks are as introverted as writers, and they're some of the ones that most need to get out there and be a little bit extroverted nowadays.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because I love to talk, I love to meet people, and I'm, you know, outwardly as appearance as outward going as I could possibly get. But I will say, I also like my downtime, because when you're at conferences like that, especially if you're on a faculty for a conference, you are on for about 20 out of 24 hours a day, you know. And so, you know, one thing that I do, I mean, I've often shared rooms with people, but as I've become, you know, more, become attending more conferences, I've learned that sometimes I need to get a room by myself. And so I sort of need that time to refuel. And so I have that quiet time, and then I can come back and sort of either do some writing or reflect on what it is that I've learned that day. So don't be afraid to do that. Like, getting a room by yourself is okay. Although I will say, you know, Teresa and Diane and I shared a room in Los Angeles, and it was like a big slumber party, and we had a really, really good time together. So I'm open to both. But sometimes more than others, I just need to sort of draw it back in and reflect. And then you get up in the morning and out you go, and you're on, you know, meeting people and sharing what it is that you do, passing business cards out, especially as the regional advisor of Indiana. Like, my goal was to meet as many other regional advisors and people from the other states. We do have a training day on the Thursday before the LA conference starts, and I printed up buttons that said Indiana SCBWI, and I was passing those out to people, and we got them to also pass out to members to sort of create a pride in what it is that we have here in Indiana, and just creating diversity of everything, of genre, of people, of stories, of lives. But also, it was a great way to meet people. It was kind of a nice icebreaker. So I'm not beyond handing you a button to get to know you.
I kind of like your plan of go out to a conference and schedule it for 2 weeks and do the conference and be intensely extroverted for a week, and then week 2, introvert time. Get yourself in a nice quiet writing spot.
Yeah, I did that this summer. Well, I've done that several times, but this summer my daughter met me out in San Diego. I had never been to San Diego, so I took Amtrak down. I become very brave in my independence of being a writer. So I flew to Los Angeles, and then after the conference, took the Amtrak down to San Diego. We met up at this apartment that we rented. It was right on the ocean, and we hung out for 2 or 3 days and just had some mother-daughter time, as her wedding was approaching. And then I got 2 or 3 days to just rest and write and sit and look at the ocean, and feeling pretty good about life,
Well, I don't want to completely talk your face off and wear you out, because I know you've got a lot going on, and I don't want to keep you talking all night. But I do have about 2 more questions for you. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, of course.
We'll think about maybe calling it a night.
Okay.
Or if you've got secrets that you've never revealed anywhere that you want to share, we can go longer for that.
I have very few secrets.
Well, here's a question that I have to ask everybody. Because this is the theme of the show. I try never to neglect to ask. Angie Karcher, have you ever seen a flying saucer, and do you believe in them?
I am sad to say I have never seen one, although we did see a flying star driving home from Louisville this weekend. Yes, I do believe in them. I am all about believing in things that I hope are real. Including Bigfoot. I am ashamed to say that I've watched Finding Bigfoot way too many times, and yet they never found him. But I do want them to be real. I do believe that there are people or aliens or whatever beings out beyond the earth. And so I'm fascinated by the unknown, and I'm pretty much open-minded about everything. But I wish I had seen it. I wish I had seen a UFO.
It's on my bucket list. I haven't seen one either. I'll add a little bit of special cheat question just because it's you and we're talking about Evansville's premier historian, and you've written a book closely connected to a haunted library. What's your take on ghosts? Are they a thing?
Yes, I think they are. I never really had a declaration of how I felt about that. But this past summer, my mother passed away, which was at the end a gift because she had been sick for a very long time. But I will tell you, I've never revealed this before. So you're getting this first here.
I'm leaning in close.
Yeah. So there was a whole thing with dragonflies that sort of occurred the day after her funeral, at least for a month, where I would see dragonflies constantly, literally dragonflies, and virtually, like on Facebook, or somebody would have a dragonfly necklace that I would meet. Or I looked down one day, I was driving to meet the pastor to plan the funeral, and I had a bracelet on that had dragonflies on it that I never even realized that were dragonflies before. So there's that. But also we had gone after the funeral to a pizza place, a favorite place where we always hang out when my brother's in town, and had gone to the restroom, and there was this little, I don't even know how to describe it, but almost like very white smoke image that sort of appeared as I was washing my hands, and then it just disappeared, and that was it. And that was the day of my mother's funeral, and I just felt some comfort in that. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I'm certainly somebody who's open-minded. I like to think about the positive side of that. I don't really want to delve too deeply into the scary side of all of it, because I do think there is some darkness that could be involved with ghosts and people that have unresolved issues in some way. But for me, that was a very positive moment, and it was sort of a way of my mother, I think, saying that everything's going to be okay, and that, life is going to go on, and this is what was supposed to happen.
But really, honestly, for real, last question. is how I always like to end the show because it catches anything I might have missed. And that is, if there was one or two bits of advice you could go back and give to yourself when you first started writing that you think maybe would have smoothed the path and made things easier for you, that writers listening could benefit from, what would you go back and tell yourself, or what do you wish that they knew about writing going in?
Yeah, this is an easy one for me now. It's to never give up. Absolutely never give up. If you set a goal for yourself, whatever it is, writing or anything, to be honest, be determined, be creative, be perseverant, prolific, and don't ever take no for an answer. If somebody says, do you know how to do this? You say yes. Even if you don't, you say yes, and then you figure it out, because you will figure it out. If you want to do it badly enough, you will figure it out. Everything that I've said yes to is one step closer to the dream. And over the years, having 4 small children, very close in age, I would write for a long time and I would submit, and then I had to take a break. Life would come along. I would have to take a job for a while or whatever occurred, and I would feel guilty about that. Well, what I would tell my younger self now is it's okay. Life happens. Your family obviously has to always come first. You take a break. That doesn't mean you're not a writer. That doesn't mean you're not going to do it. I'm 52 and I'm finally having some success at this. And so if I gave up when I was 43, I would never know that I was actually going to be a writer with 6 books out by the time I was, 54. And so you have to always be positive. You have to have a thick skin. If somebody's giving you a critique, it's to make your writing better. Yes, you get the final say on whether you take their advice or not, but most of the time they're right. Have a really good critique group, and continue to create your base of like-minded people and your support group, be it in person or on social media or however that is, by attending conferences, and lean on them if you need them. But never give up, and just try to stay positive and do what you love. I think if you're doing what you love, it's not work. And I know that if I never sold another book today, I would die a happy person, because I am doing what I love. So
you can't ask for much more than that, can you?
No, I don't think so.
Angie, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for clearing the time to talk with us tonight. Remind esteemed audience where they can find you online and purchase all your books and all that good stuff.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, my website is rhymerev.com. It's RHYMEREV.com. And then also you can find me, if you just type in Angie Karcher with a K, Karcher, it should come up on Google. But you can find me at authorangiekarcher@gmail.com is my website. And then if you have any interest with Indiana SCBWI or SCBWI in general, my email address is indiana-ra@scbwi.org.
And as always, esteemed audience, find me at middlegradeninja.com. Go check out past archives of the show, written interviews with agents, editors, writers, all the folks you want to know more about. Make sure you download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. Get yourself a copy of the Book of David Chapter 1. They're free. Go nuts. It's a good time. Angie, I have been asking our guests to sign us off with our extremely ninja-like sign-off phrase, hiya, and what have you. Will you sign us off?
I would be glad to, and thank you for having me. Hiya, and what have you.